And let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Mr. Jeffrey J. Clayton is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition, a trade organization that's committed to... I had to yell a little bit there, is committed to developing the most efficient means for pretrial release of criminal defendants by reducing the financial impact on government and the taxpayers while maximizing public safety. He's worked with major stakeholders and lawmakers on bail issues throughout the nation and on both the federal and the state level. And he served as a resource for many outlets. He joined the American Bail Coalition as policy director in May 2015. He holds a BBA from Baylor, a Master of Science in Public Policy from the University of Rochester, and he has his Juris Doctorate from Sturm College of Law, University in Denver. It is a joy and a pleasure to welcome to the microphones and telephones of Liberty Watch for the first time, Jeffrey Clayton. Welcome.
Thanks, Charles, for having me on.
My pleasure. As I like to tell people, I'm glad they could be had. On foundation, what is the American Bail Coalition? Who founded it, and how is it funded?
Absolutely. The American Bail Coalition, as you said, is a trade association, which means it's a group of companies that put money together to have a common interest. In this case, they're underwriters of criminal bail bondsmen. And so we work on the issue of bail reform. You've probably heard end cash bail reform in New York. That's been my life for the last 8 years now.
In other words, you're trying to end cash bail, or you don't want to end cash bail?
Nope. I've been on the other side of defending the constitutional right to bail first, I always say, and then the right for private industry to have a role in that and not sort of delegate that power to the government.
So, in other words, you want the system, you're for more or less the status quo, or you're not? It's not clear to me. Most interviews I start out knowing exactly what the person's position is. Yours is not 100% clear to me.
Well, I'd say we are against the movement to eliminate bail and release all criminals pending trial and eliminate pretrial incarceration. And I think that's what the movement on the left is trying to do. So not only are they trying to get rid of, commercial bail bondsmen, but they're also trying to get rid of the right to bail and just allow largely most folks to just get out of jail for free, regardless of how dangerous they may be.
This also has a lot of unintended consequences in terms of people like, for instance, bail bond agents, guys that are that do private arrests. I mean, we've had a 20-year tradition, Tanter versus Trainer on private bail arrests. That would really screw that up too, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every state that says we're getting rid of bail means that they're getting rid of what is the long arm of the law, according to law professors in the Supreme Court, which is they can go across state lines and bring people back. Mm-hmm. I've worked on cases of getting people back across international lines. We worked with the State Department to get an offender out of Morocco one time. So it does happen, and it's an important way to get people back into court and get justice.
Boy, if you think it's hard to get an armed guy into New York to make a bail arrest, try Morocco, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a little more difficult down there.
Yeah, a little bit, I guess so. As long as the monkey doesn't tip him off. Anyway, I'm, Indiana Jones. Anyway, explain to the audience, if you would, how does bail work?
Sure, absolutely. And it kind of goes back to our constitutional tradition of this country. Sort of the origin of bail is that I'm putting up for you. I'm swearing that you're going to make it, and I'm making a financial guarantee that you're going to be there. And the court would set an amount, say it was, let's just go with $1,000 because it's easy to think of. I'm going to put Charles's bail. I'm going to swear that he's going to be there, and if he doesn't, there's some consequence, which is I have to pay the $1,000 or I have to deliver Charles up to court.
Yeah.
And of course, you can pick who you want to be, quote, the jailer of your choice, according to the Supreme Court. And so that was the tradition of bail, and that kind of continues on to this day, where in 46 states you can choose to have a commercial bail bondsman for compensation person to, put up for you, or you can choose a friend or family member to make the financial guarantee. And then in states where there's no bail bondsman, there's still monetary bail or cash bail where people put up actual assets, even though there's not a third party involved.
Mm-hmm. Now, recently, the Illinois Supreme Court made a ruling that had, I think, the effect of getting rid of cash bail. What did the Illinois Supreme Court just do?
Well, so most state constitutions say the right to bail by sufficient sureties, which means, hey, I get to put up for Charles. And we have a system like that, whether it's, somebody has to do it non-for-profit, that I'm just doing it out of the goodness of my heart to make this guarantee, or for-profit. Most states have that language. And so to get rid of bail and go to a system of detention like New Jersey, where we just make a list of charges and say you can or can't, it was thought that you had to change the Illinois state constitution to do that, because Illinois has the right to bail by sufficient sureties, which means monetary bail has to be set. The Illinois Supreme Court said, no, that's not what it means in Illinois, which I think was a shocking result. And the Washington Supreme Court even said if they ever visit this question, clearly they're going to be on our side saying there's a right to bail. Well, so the Illinois legislature has deleted the word bail from all statutes, and the Illinois Supreme Court just said they can do that. And so now what we're left with is a list of charges that the prosecutor can seek prevention on, otherwise get out of jail free on.
Explain prevention. What you mean by prevention?
So preventative detention instead of bail would be to say, hey, Charles, we don't like you. We're going to say you get no bail, meaning we're not going to set an amount, meaning you sit in jail. And that's kind of what happened in the January 6th situation, was we can just say, oh, these are all dangerous, horrible people like the federal system, and we can just lock them up. So we're going to be able to do that in Illinois. But the charges are going to be really limited. We can talk about some examples of that. But and, of course, now the judges decided, right? Judge says, Charles, $100,000. Jeff says, oh, I don't want to post that. Charles stays in jail. Now it's whatever the legislature says it is on this list. Otherwise, you get out of jail for free.
Yeah, I want to petition the guest for a change of venue on the exemplar. I think the example for discussion should be Murgatroyd, not Charles.
Fair enough. We'll use another suspect here. You're the accused. So keep that in mind.
Murgatroyd from Mars, All right.
It does apply, yeah.
What are the sides here? In other words, who are the sides? I mean, let's say it's a tennis match. Who's playing who or whom?
Sure. Well, the criminal justice reformers on the left, post-Obama, which includes sort of George Soros, the Arnold Foundation, and others, some billionaires and just some true believers, that really want to eliminate all pretrial incarceration. And what does that mean? That means when we arrest somebody, we take them to jail. They don't stay there. They all get out. That's their goal here, because they feel that it's unfair that somebody should be in jail pending trial. I think it's even worse.
Okay. If I can interrupt
can't afford to post bail.
If I can interrupt your brilliant answer with another dumb question for a minute, I want you to continue to the brilliant answer after the dumb question. Even Theodore Kaczynski?
Well,
he's dead now. But
well,
yeah.
Yes, I would say the true believers would say everybody's presumed innocent until they're convicted, and therefore the government should not put them in jail, period. End of story.
There's an expression in Spanish, oy vey. Anyway, you were saying we're up on a break, but you were saying that so there's the Sorosites or Sorosites, the Sorosectomy victims. I don't know, whatever you want to call them on one side, and who's on the other side, or what?
Well, it's just, I would say it's moms, dads, people that just want to have safety in their community, and they think the way that judges and prosecutors have been handling this on a case-by-case basis is a better way to go. What it comes down to is name your state capital. Do you want legislators to go in and say, here's a bill that determines who stays in jail or not for the next 20 years, or do you want to let judges decide it on a case-by-case basis? That's really what it comes down to.
Well, our system has always been that the legislature decides and the executive enforces and the court decides what's constitutional. This is sort of somewhat blame shifting to the courts, if you will, is it not?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you've got independent judges who are saying, you know what, I think this guy should have to post $100,000 bail or not get out.
Right.
And we go, oh, no, it's because he can't afford it. No,
Well,
the judge looks at the criminal record and says, too dangerous.
In the immortal words of Beretta, if you can't do the crime, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. All right, stand by, Jeff. We got our break coming up. We got about 3 minutes here if you need to powder your nose. We got a caller on hold, and I got a whole bunch more questions for you. So hang in there. All right?
Got it.
And welcome back to Liberty Watch, where we're discussing law versus justice with Jeffrey J. Clayton, and he is with an organization, a nonprofit, right?
Yes.
A nonprofit called the American Bail Coalition, and we have Bunker who wants to ask you a quick question. I also want to talk a little bit more about the stakeholders in this, but I want to be respectful of the caller's time. Bunker, your question for Jeffrey.
Oh, it's kind of more of a statement, but it is a question, too.
Okay.
My father was a bail bondsman here in Tucson. Started up in Phoenix with Arizona Bail Bond, opened his own company down here, Tucson Bail Bond. And I'm sure that the public is not really aware of the contribution that bail bondsmen did with the law enforcement officers. My dad was highly respected with the Highway Patrol, county sheriffs, and the PD. And one of the things is that, again, what people don't realize that what they do is an extension of what I shouldn't say extension, but an area that the law itself cannot go into, which is in a degree protecting people's rights. And also, I guess my question would be, is how do we educate people to the fact that they are a very necessary and contributing part of it? Because my dad wouldn't bail bond just anybody. He would talk to the guys, and if he thought the guy was scum or a really bad person, he wouldn't bail him.
Jeffrey?
Well, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think, thanks for calling in. I think to start off, I think you point out something that's important, which is that bail bondsmen create a good balance. People don't realize what they're giving up when they give up the right to bail and a bail bondsman. They're giving up a core constitutional right. And that is an important thing to give up, because the reason there is a right to bail is because detention has been used against political opponents historically throughout history.
That would never happen.
Yes, it would.
And so the other thing I'll say is that my dad was a police officer in the 70s, and he used to say we loved bail bondsmen because they didn't need probable cause. And that is the main thing, because the bail bondsmen have custody of the defendant, which means they can do anything up to arresting them in order to get them to comply. And so you're right. It can be a tool of law enforcement. It helps law enforcement locate people that have warrants. I mean, a lot of the insurance companies will tell bail bondsmen if they're that dangerous, obviously you don't want to go storming in the house, but, you're going to get a dangerous guy off the community by calling the local community. And as, my dad and everybody always said, no bail bondsman ever gets a collar logged down at the station house. It's always the police officers that log the collars, even though the bail bondsman may lead them right to the kill.
Mm-hmm.
But that happens all the time. So bail bondsmen are great. They serve as personal sureties in this country, and it's an important tradition.
And sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning, he's the guy that goes down there and gets the guy out of jail, which otherwise, if the way the system works, he would have to wait until the next morning or until the next legal morning on Monday to get out.
Yeah. All right,
absolutely.
Bunker.
Nobody wants to go down to jail at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's for sure. And bail bondsmen certainly do that.
Mm-hmm. A lot of their offices are close to the jail, parenthetically. All right, Bunker. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jeffrey. It's a great contribution. Bye-bye.
Right.
You got it.
And it's what you get with talk radio, callers that understand what's going on. So we were talking about the other influences. Besides the Soros side, what is the other side?
Well, I think generally it's prosecutors, law enforcement, and starting to be, I think, chambers of commerce that are seeing what's happening with criminal justice reform and saying, hey, it's gone a little bit too far. And I think that's right. I think what has happened is that anybody who's against repeat criminals is emboldened right now, because that is what is destroying communities right now, which is we got too loosey-goosey, we got too soft on it. So I think the other side is, pro-business, pro-public safety, just regular people that have kind of had enough of all this.
Could you care to guess the city in Arizona that has the highest crime rate in the state?
I mean, I'm going to guess Phoenix, but I guess maybe I could...
Tucson.
Okay, that was my second choice.
Yeah, Tucson is the petri dish of the left. And anything that goes wrong in San Francisco, this is a microcosm of it right here. All right, back to the phones. And Rick, your quick question for Jeffrey Clayton.
Hi. Do you have anything to say to the January 6th defendants who appear to be the opposite of a murder suspect in Chicago that gets to walk out the door, but a 73-year-old grandmother who walked 3 steps up the Capitol, then turned around, but she's caught on videotape, you have like 6 months without bail?
Well, yes, I do. I think it's outrageous. I think a recent research report on the federal system proves that. When we went down this road of get rid of bail in the federal system and go to the system of detention, 1 out of 4 people sat in jail pending trial. That was in 1984. Now we're up to 75%. And that's because of a wrongly decided U.S. Supreme Court decision that I'm not going to get into. But getting rid of the right to bail, that's exactly right, because guess what? A lot of these cases would have been outrageous. The bonds would have been high, but the public would have said, we don't like this Justice Department. We're posting this bond. We don't trust this Justice Department. We're posting the bond. And that's important, right, because the public can fight back under a system of money bail. Under a system of detention, exactly what can happen is, do you trust this Justice Department enough to say we should just be able to lock people up and throw away the keys before conviction? I certainly don't. My Scots-Irish relatives certainly don't, and I think most people probably don't either. But, they have the power to do it, and that's what they've been doing.
Elections have consequences.
Absolutely.
Especially when you don't feel like following the Constitution.
Yes, and, the notion that we could just charge somebody with a federal prosecutor and just lock them up for 2 years is outrageous.
It is.
It really is, and the public can do nothing about it.
Rick, do you have a fast follow-up?
Yeah, I want to just kind of expand on what your guest just said. So someone charged with a misdemeanor crime, a misdemeanor is 364 days, or if you're 364 days, right, it's not a felony, and they're held in detention for over 365 days. That's a huge abuse of power. It's a huge abuse of person's civil rights.
It's an Eighth Amendment, and it's a straight-up Eighth Amendment violation, cruel and unusual punishment.
I concur. Well, thank you very much for your show.
My pleasure. Jeff?
I would also say that Thurgood Marshall said getting rid of bail is all about the shortcuts we take to a conviction. And think about that. In 1984, it took 60 days to bring these cases to trial. Now it takes a year. And he's right. So the bail decision is even more crucial because guess what? You're going to rot in jail for another 10 months that you wouldn't have 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask another question. Let's take the bottom of the hour break early so I don't have to interrupt the middle of a question and tell you there's a break coming. And then let's come back. Because on the other side of this, I want to talk about the effect on poor people. Because I know you have quite a lot to say about it, and I'd like the audience to hear it. And here to discuss due process, among many other things with us, is attorney Jeffrey J. Clayton. Mr. Clayton is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition, and it is a nonprofit, and it's advocating for the right to bail. So I was teasing before the break, are poor people languishing in jail for the side reason that they cannot afford a bail bond in terms of due process that song was just referencing?
Well, I think certainly some have been and probably some are, but it's a small percentage. Over the last decade, we put the kind of the spotlight on the idea that, maybe the sleeping on the park bench guy shouldn't be in there for, 90 days because he can't afford $100 bail. And certainly we see some of that on the lower end. But by and large, the background of the defendants who stay in jail, they have long criminal records, and they haven't showed up for court in the past. So just to give you an example, in New York, the average defendant that doesn't post a bond of $1,000 or less has generally 10 prior strikes against them. Combination of convictions, felonies and misdemeanors, and they haven't shown up for court. So, that's what judges are looking at. And obviously we could always say, well, if I hit Mega Millions tonight, I'd be getting out. Well, hopefully that judge would be smart enough to be adjusting that bond. So we could always.
You mean if the judge hit Mega Millions or the defendant?
Well, if the judge hit Mega Millions, I don't think you're getting a reset anytime soon. I imagine familiar with too many judges who'd be sticking around.
Probably not. I know if I hit the Mega Millions, I'd just offer to buy out the 5 radio stations here and be done with it. So.
Well, hopefully you'd post my bail at least.
Well, hopefully so. It depends how much you're going to kick back. Anyway. Hey, I'm from Chicago. It's just part of the blood. Criminal justice reform advocates have been marketing this around the country as a better system for those currently charged, but some say that those reforms end up weakening accountability in the criminal justice system. Jeffrey Clayton, wherein lies the truth?
I think that's true. I think it does weaken accountability because there's no third-party involvement. There's no private industry involvement, and we're accountable. I mean, the members I have are admitted. When you say we, please
define we, if you would.
Yeah, we, the insurance corporate companies that I represent and the bail bondsmen, are financially accountable. I mean, they have to get admitted by insurance departments. They have to put down major deposits. When people don't show up, we have to pay, and I think that's important. The other thing is we only make money if we get people out of jail and we're successful. And so when you
successful, meaning they show up?
They show up, or we have to go arrest them, bring them back. And so when you say, well, we'll just let them out for free, that kills, there's no incentive for them to come back. And then the other thing is we put them on government supervision programs. So we basically put them on ineffective, what we call pretrial supervision that generally just doesn't work. And so we feel a lot better because we go, well, we've got a government program that works from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. that watches these people. So we feel like, okay, well, we don't need to worry about it. And
this is the screen doors on a submarine mentality.
Right. I call it supervision by paper shuffling because when you find out they've done something, what do? You print out something and you send it over to the DA's office and say they violated. And then you go home and you have a nice weekend. I mean,
unless they come to visit you.
Right. And as the bail bondsman said, when these guys take off on a bail bondsman, they're right after them. So, yeah, they will be, if they're leaving on the 2 o'clock a.m. plane, the bail bondsman should be right behind them.
What is what the Illinois Supreme Court did in saying that the legislature can eliminate bond a departure from the history and culture of the country?
I think so. I mean, Illinois was governed by the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, and that language had continued. And now we're going to get in the business of the legislature saying, if you steal 6 guns, the prosecutor can file for detention, but if you steal 5, you're good. The prosecutor can't detain you at all. And that's where we've come. That's just a ridiculous departure from what bail has been in Illinois.
Does the bureaucratic tendency to reduce everything to an integer on a spreadsheet, does that diminish our country or does it refine it somehow?
I think we've dehumanized everybody in the criminal justice system. We just go, well, you're criminals, you're guilty, you're not, you're this, you're that. And that this process of getting rid of bail and just talking about, these are the people we're going to lock up and these are the people we're not. And we're just, and legislatures are going to get to do that on a year-in, year-out basis. It's just a bad idea. We've dehumanized people. They're just numbers at this point, and that's bad.
It strikes me that doing that is sort of like legislation via the roll of dice.
I think so. And the other thing, I gave an example. It would be like somebody saying, we want to get rid of the First Amendment, but we want to increase free speech activities. It's just not. You can't increase liberty and get rid of the right to bail at the same time, and that's what the activists say we should do. And that just doesn't make sense.
Americans for fornication for chastity.
Exactly. Drunks for
drunkards. Drunkards. Yeah, right. Drunkards against mad mothers. Yeah, I know. Once again, we're back to Spanish. Oy vey. Folks, if you want to call in and get in on this, 520-790-2040, especially if you have any reformed attorneys out there, or maybe even unreformed attorneys, who knows? If you're feral attorneys, if you want to get in on this, I'd love to hear it. I also want to hear what the lay public has to say. This isn't a program dedicated for attorneys, but we end up... Most of the people interviewed have either PhD or LLD after their name, it seems, and I thrust my high school diploma up against them once a week as a man without letters. But what has been the result of similar measures to what's happened in Illinois elsewhere in the country?
Well, I think everybody's looked at New York as a good example of when we said, hey, judges, these are the bad people on this side, and these are the good people on this side. And everybody we say is the good people, even though they're not. They're for example, the guy that got arrested 135 times, and thank the Democrats in Albany for that because he got out for free. I think the result has been that recidivists have slipped through the cracks, and they can continue to do their repeat behavior over and over and over again. And that's why...
Oopsie, we lost him again. Well, that's just the perfect time to take the last break, so that by the time he calls back in, he will be on a program that's rolling. So online with us is Jeffrey Clayton, and Jeffrey Clayton is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition. He's an attorney and a distinguished one. And so a personal question, if I may, Jeff, and that is, as an attorney, do you have any personal stake in this, in the bail question?
No, I don't. I mean, I've been hired, basically to represent this industry and the constitutional right to bail, and that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. It's not like this is your only work. You could do something else in the law if it weren't this.
I could, and this is just fun because we've got a constitutional right behind us, and that's what we're talking about. If it was just, the right to sell a car or, maybe even guns, although I guess maybe there is a right to make a gun. But
yeah, there is a right.
I guess I'll say there's few products that are protected by the Constitution. How about that?
Mm-hmm. And this is a behavior that is protected, or a right that is protected by the Constitution. So, are you telling me that it's a passion as well as something that you do for a living?
It is. I mean, I read U.S. versus Salerno in 1989, and I thought that's a bad idea. And somehow 20 years later, I'm still working on it, which is the right to bail.
Gosh, I wish I had. The only thing with Salerno on it is butter cookies that I know about. I wish I'd read that decision before I did this interview so I could have a better conversation about it with you. But I give you my word, by the next time we talk, I will know the metes and bounds of U.S. versus Salerno. Anyway, is it something you are, as a lawyer, probably trained not? Is it? Wait a minute. Hang on a second. If your kid got arrested, what would you want for him or her?
Well, one of my good friends, when I took this job, before I took it, I called him and said, "What do you think from a civil rights, perspective?" And what he said is right. And kind of what I say is, you want to get whoever it is, yourself or your relative, as far away from the government as you can while they're trying to prosecute you. And that's what bail's all about. Yeah, you don't want to agree to an ankle monitor. Yeah, you don't want to agree to house arrest. Yeah, you don't want to agree to any other restraints on your liberty. You want to get as far away from the government as you can until you figure this out. Mm-hmm. And that's why you want to minimize the amount of tentacles of the state, I call them, that the government has in you while you're waiting to defend yourself. Because the problem is you may screw up, and if they're watching everything, then that just gives them one more hammer to get you to plead to the original charge that, hey, maybe a jury's not going to find you guilty of.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I do, I have been in October, it'll be 30 years I've been teaching self-defense, and I'm certified by the state to teach it, especially the laws on the use of force. And one of the things I tell people is, because most people who haven't been to the system have no idea what the system is. And so what the system specializes in is prosecuting the victim. Not the perpetrator, but the victim. Because at the scene of any activity that turns out to be criminal, there's only 5 positions: the law enforcement officer, the victim, the perpetrator, the witnesses, and the bystanders that know nothing. And the police, when they arrive, are going to assign you a category. And if you don't claim a category, you are not going to like the category they assign. And the best thing you can do for the system is stay out of it, because the system is designed to ingest you, digest you, and excrete you into the prisons. That's what the system is designed to do. Most people think the system is designed to protect them, and that's not how it works. The question is, and if you want to disagree with me, please feel free to do so, but the question is, how do you get the general public to understand that?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that part, but I can agree with you that rights don't vindicate themselves. That's what I always say.
Thank you.
You know, you have to fight for yourself in the criminal justice system. There's a reason for that there's a right to remain silent. And yeah, cops play cops and robbers. I mean, they keep it simple, right? They go, you are the bad guy, you are the good guy, we take bad guys to jail, we let the prosecutors sort it out. And that's what they tend to do. So, your best thing in the criminal justice system is to advocate for yourself. But, if it comes time and you're under suspicion, obviously, then it's time to stop talking. Because the police are not your friend at times, and yeah, they do want to convict. That's why they're there.
If only I could get people to understand that. By the time they're done with 8 hours of me, they get it chapter and verse. And I do a test with 50 questions, and believe me, they understand how to act in the event they have to use force in defending themselves, or even threaten to use force to defend themselves. But I think at large, the majority of this company, the right-acting, decent people of America, do not understand how that works. I really think they don't.
They don't, and they don't understand how the process works. Even use of force, most people don't understand. It's very technical, but again, obviously reasonable but mistaken belief is a doctrine in the use of force that most people don't realize. Wow, the limit to whether it's criminal or not depends on what a jury of my peers may think about that.
Yeah,
that's correct.
And just because it's legal doesn't mean you won't be challenged to defend it. Absolutely.
So
a lot of people
maybe will do it for the wrong reason.
A lot of people think, I can defend myself, and that's within the law. And yeah, it's true, but you may still stand trial for it and have to prove it in a court. That's why we have grand juries, because prosecutors don't have the cojones to do it themselves sometimes, and they need the shield of the right. public to go ahead and say I had to prosecute, even though I didn't really want to. Yep. Bill, you're on with Jeffrey Clayton of the American Bail Association. Your comment or question, please.
I think the subject of this show today has touched on something. I think it applies to the broader issue of what a lot of folks trying to do in this country by changing the fundamental systems of, the legal system or whatever. And they forget sometimes, and I don't know if it's a matter of the legal profession needs to have a better understanding of why the laws came to be the way they are and not. It's like this tapestry of tried and true methods throughout the history of, Judeo-Christian systems, the English law, however you want to frame it, these are things that we try different forms of other ways of doing things, and when you try and overturn them, there may be legitimate reasons to do so, but there are cause and effect consequences that reverberate throughout the rest of the system. If there's a problem with, say, bail, okay, identify what the specific things are that are wrong in the system and try and find ways to, redress those problems rather than just say, no, we're not going to have bail anymore and throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you end up with, so many instances where a criminal that should never have been let back out on the street until they faced a trial is out on the street, and you end up with these, a frustration overall out in the public of why are we doing this way?
Bill, the problem isn't bail. The problem is the use of bail as a wedge issue to separate people from their rights. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think, back when I started, we would go duke it out in the courtroom or in the legislature, and then, we'd go sit down and have a beer together. And I think now people are taking things a little bit too personally. They're also thinking that we can do a better job doing judges' jobs themselves in state legislatures. And I'm sorry, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. I don't trust state legislators to go in and draw the lines in the halls of the legislature, some of which only last like 60 days. I'd rather make my argument in front of a judge. So, yeah, I think that's right. I think we've tried to rethink something, and that's a lot of when you see activism, sometimes on both sides. We've had a little ban the Department of Energy talk, but anytime we're banning something and not talking about what we're replacing it with, that's politics for you. That's not policy. That has no impact. And unfortunately, end money bail, that's where we're at. And replace it with what? That's always the question, and we don't know.
I'm going to push back a little bit on you, Jeff, and that's that if you take your chances in the court rather than with the legislature, you're dealing with one person wielding an awful lot of power as opposed to an elected body. And I think the American system has always militated towards trusting the elected body more than the unitary power of a judiciary officer. Hasn't it?
I think so, but in this case it's a little bit different because we're talking about the fundamental question of what the appropriate bail is and whether you're going to stay in jail or not. And I think that is more fact-specific and is a pure thing that judges should be doing. Now, I think it is within the purview of the legislature to say two things. These people are really bad, and you should really either set high bails or not let them out, or these people we think are really limited, because ultimately you're right. I mean, the legislatures can define what the crimes are, and so they have a lot of leeway. But I think in the case of bail, we do want less legislative line drawing on a lot of this, which is sort of who's eligible for bail and who's not.
What would Jefferson do?
Well, I think the founders were all pro the right to bail, dating back to the Four Knights case, which was probably still something they were thinking about, which was in the 1600s, the Five Knights, Darnell's case. They didn't want to pay for the King's War, and so the king locked them up and said, you don't want to pay taxes, you're going to jail with no bail. And that's why we have bail. So I think the founders would all be on the, hey, you want to have the right to bail because guess what? The people in power may be people you don't like someday, and you may want to have the right to bail. So it's pretty simple. I'm Scots-Irish. We don't like the government. That's why we like bail.
That'd be that almost would fit on a bumper sticker. Is the bond industry unregulated?
It's largely regulated throughout the country, so by departments of insurance. Heavily regulated in some place and not so much in others.
So it's not universally true that the bond industry is unregulated?
No, it's not. In fact, in the time of Taylor versus Tainter and prior to the first commercial bail shop in San Francisco in 1879, it was unregulated, which means I could charge whatever premiums I want. I could do whatever I want in terms of getting people to agree for me to be to go bail them out.
Mm-hmm. I think we can all agree that the country was a bit less refined in the era of the gold rush than it is, legally speaking, today. Are there any other orgs besides yourself that are speaking to this issue?
Well, I think we're the primary one on, protecting the constitutional right to bail, and obviously for bail bondsmen. There's several other organizations, but I'd say primarily prosecutors groups. Certainly the National Sheriff's Association, had a policy that dealt with this. So we're primarily from law enforcement groups who are involved, at least on our side of the issue.
What is the web address for the American Bail Coalition?
It's AmericanBailCoalition.org, also on Twitter and Facebook.
Mm-hmm. Gee, I've never thought to follow you before. It's just not something, this isn't in the American consciousness, generally speaking, unless you live in a city like San Francisco or its petty mall equivalent, Tucson, that you don't usually think on these things.
Well, that's how we'd like it to be, and that's how it should be, which is it's just a thing that happens within a criminal case, and the public generally doesn't have to worry about it. That's where we'd like to keep it. Keep our constitutional rights just functioning. Undisturbed is sort of the goal. But, yeah, the public isn't paying attention to the issue at all.
At some point, you've got to turn off autopilot.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
I think we got to get back to basics in this country. I'm sort of the original constitutional rights are what we need to focus on.
All right. So how can this audience be of service to you and make a difference in that guise?
Well, follow our website, and when we get into these big fights, let the legislators and policymakers and judges know what you feel about this issue.
Okay.
And we certainly make it easy for people to do that on our website.
AmericanBailCoalition.org?
Yes, sir.
AmericanBailCoalition.org. Hugh Hewitt says you got to say it 7 times for people to hear it. So anyway, we'll talk more about AmericanBailCoalition.org. Is that where we get more info? Are there other places we can look at? Like you said, there's Twitter, and I guess it's X now, but I'm still going to call it Twitter. I don't care what Elon says. I don't work for him, and I don't promote him or promote against him. It's just a thing. So there's Twitter, and there's what else? There's Instagram?
Well, Facebook, but I'm biased in favor of AmericanBailCoalition.org because we have the best information going over there.
AmericanBailCoalition.org. All right. You have been very forthright with us, and you've answered exactly the questions that have been asked. And ultimately, that's all you can ask a guest on talk radio to do is to face the issue on the table and to address it honestly, which you have. Is there anything else you'd like to tell this audience in the last 40 seconds or so that you'd like them to know about either the issue or your organization?
No, just watch what's happening in Illinois to see whether you think stealing 5 guns is good and stealing 6 guns is bad, because we think the wheels are gonna fall off in Illinois.
What do you mean going to? This is a baby car. This is a baby carriage on 4 axles and no wheels. Illinois is the legal definition of the what do you call it? Not palindrome, but the I can't think of the phrase, but it's the opposite of flustercluck. I mean, it's Illinois is. I moved from Chicago in 1978 because of its gun laws. I am a political refugee for the right to keep and bear arms to Arizona. So, boy, Illinois. Yeah. AmericanBailCoalition.org, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
I got to go. It's time. The other guest is calling in, so I got to let you go. Jeffrey, you're a joy.
Have a great day. Thanks.
You too. AM 1030 KVOI, Cortero, Tucson, The Voice. Stay tuned for America Armed and Free.